The average steak in a grocery store touches 50 to 100 hands and machines. And we're putting that into our body, even though it's grass-fed or it's organic. Hunters always say, oh, I'm a tip-to-tail hunter, but they leave 90% of it in the field. I mean, I've eaten coyote, I've eaten bobcat. A lot of my dishes come from people that say they hate wild game, but their favorite dish is blank. And so my goal is to create that dish and have them over for dinner and have them enjoy that dish with said wild game that they don't like. But I'll say it again, I love testicles. And all these Texas boys are like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm getting every usable piece of meat. They're like, all right, cool. To say gamey, it shouldn't even be a real word. I didn't realize, but the adrenal gland on top of the kidney has more vitamin C than 6 oranges. No one could tell the difference. And so once you get past this idea that, ew, that's gross, your world opens up. This is Jeremiah Doughty with From Field to Plate, and you're listening to Living Country in the City, episode 30.
Y'all ready for your dose of flyover state spirit? Straight from the concrete jungle? Well, put down your latte and pull on your boots. It's time for Living Country in the City.
Hey y'all, welcome to episode 30 of Living Country in the City. I just want to say a big thank you to all y'all who tune in for each and every episode. It's a huge highlight of my day whenever one of you shares an episode, reaches out, or says hello in an event. I've honestly never felt cooler in my life than when a couple of you recognized me out at Total Archery Challenge in Snowbird. And I really appreciate y'all and hope y'all keep tuning in because I've got some exciting surprises coming up, even more awesome guests, and I'm looking forward to sharing all that with all y'all. Now, if you've been enjoying the show, make sure you search for Living Country in the City on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is, and hit that subscribe button. It would mean a great deal if you could head on over also and leave a quick rating and review. Y'all may not realize it, but each and every one of you that subscribes and leaves that rating and review makes a big and very real impact on the growth of this podcast by helping it move up through the search listings. Also, don't forget that I'm participating in the Hike to Hunt Challenge to help raise funds for backcountry hunters and anglers. You know, the fight for our public lands is really one of the most important issues facing hunters today, and BHA is on the forefront of that battle. So I need y'all to head on over to hiketohuntchallenge.com and make a donation of any size, small or large, everything helps. And if y'all make a donation on my behalf and email me your donation receipts, I'll pledge to hike 1 mile for every $5 donated and match the largest donation with weight in my pack up to 100 pounds, and then live stream myself doing my hike up the Griffith Observatory Fire Trail. Now, if that number well exceeds the $100 mark, I'll take on an even more difficult hike. So head on over to hiketohuntchallenge.com and make your donation now. So, I'm super excited about today's podcast because I'm talking with a fellow born and raised Southern California resident, Jeremiah Doughty. Now, Jeremiah is not only a hunter and outdoorsman, but also a blogger and chef who specializes in recipes featuring wild game. So I'm super excited to get his insight on how to take a meal from field to plate. Jeremiah, thank you so much for hopping on the call today.
Oh, no worries. I'm just glad that we can finally find some time to do it.
Yeah, we have been talking for, at least a month at this point, and one of us will get busy, and then something will happen, and then we'll get back into talking again. So I'm glad I finally found a time to get you on.
Yeah, same.
And I love that it took someone from all the way out in Texas to actually introduce us, and we live, about half an hour from each other, depending on traffic?
It was like a half an hour to 3 hours, depending on traffic.
Exactly. You know, you always know someone from Southern California when they don't tell you distances, they tell you time of day and time. It's
100. Yeah, people are like, oh, hey, how far do your parents live? I'm like, 20 to 40 minutes. They're like, well, miles. I go, 11. They're like, what? 11 miles? It takes you an hour? I was like, sometimes.
Well, it's funny. I remember I was visiting some friends out in Mississippi, and one of them, we were going out to a bar, and I'm like, oh, how far is this bar? And they're like, oh, 25 miles. And I looked at them like, are you insane? We're not. And then, but then they reminded me, they're like, no, that's not like a 4-hour drive like it is in LA. That's a half an hour drive at most. And albeit that's a little bit long even for me to go to a bar. But anyway, I digress. Like I said, good to have you on the show. I got to introduce to who you are through Jessica Taylor Byers. You guys went out on a bear trip.
We did, yeah. We went to Alberta, Canada, and hunted some black bear. So good times.
How'd the two of you get connected?
Jessica and I got connected through Sportsman's Box. It's a monthly subscription box. 2 years ago, gosh. And I had a podcast back in the day called Tasting Wild, and I had her on because I was doing a segment with females in the industry. So I had on Julie McQueen, I had on Lauren from Real Camo Girl, and then I wanted a new and up-and-comer. So I said, hey, I'm going to pick Jessica Taylor Byers to come on and be the new up-and-comer. She only had, 2,000 followers at the time, and now I consider her like my little sister, and I love to watch her now have like 40, almost 50,000 followers, and it's cool to see her progression from this girl who was scared to get on and talk on the first podcast to filming and getting on 1 million podcasts. It's cool to watch her develop and grow.
Well, she's a fantastic person. She has such a great positive attitude. I talk with her fairly often just about stuff that's going on with the podcast and just with my hunting trips and stuff in general. And she just always has such a, honestly, really good insight on things for me. And I always get a lot out of our conversation. So she's definitely good, a solid person.
Yeah, she actually called me today. She's like, "Big brother, I need help." So what you're doing to her, she's doing to me. So it's kind of cool to see this circle within our industry where we're not afraid to ask for help from somebody or guidance from somebody in an area. Because I think so often, especially in this outdoor industry, you want to be the best. And sometimes being the best means not asking for help. But I think truly being the best is when you do ask for help. So good on her for continuing that aspect of it. So
no, definitely. And also another connection, you were the one that introduced her, and she in turn introduced me to the guys over at Gut Pile.
Yeah, Jim Clark's a good dude who started Gut Pile.
Yep. He's one of the people that always manages whenever I'm doing some random Instagram live in the mornings. He always hops on and gives me a little bit of crap in the morning for whatever I'm doing. But yeah, he's a good guy, and can't wait to get my hands on Gut Pile fish coming out. So
yeah, Gut Pile fish. I just got the mail today, and I played it by myself just to see how it would. I have three different people, but all myself. That's how nerdy I am that I play a card game against myself. So I got mad when I threw down action cards against myself. But no, good guys over there. I got introduced to them. Gosh, he just sent me the game like over a year ago. He said, "Hey, I'm starting this game. Can you test it?" And I tested the original Gut Pile, and him and I became good buddies. And him and I are planning a moose hunt in Alaska next September. So should be good times.
Nice. That is definitely, that's got to be like one of my top 3 like dream hunts right there. It'd be like an Alaskan moose hunt. It's up there probably right with something on like Prince of Wales Island, or heading out for grizzly maybe someday. Definitely not now.
Yeah, right?
I do not have nearly enough experience under my belt, and I'm not nearly a good enough shot to be willing to risk pissing off a grizzly bear.
Hey, all you gotta do is make sure you have a friend that's slower than you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I told Jessica when we were hunting bears, I said, "Hey, I love you to death, but I will knock you over. I'm faster than you." So just be ready to do that.
Absolutely. Well, so anyway, why don't you give the listeners maybe a quick background kind of on how you got your start in the outdoors and hunting and doing what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So I started at a young age bird hunting here in Southern California. The hunting industry is a very mild industry from other states, and our big draw is bird hunting. We have a lot of upland game here in Southern California, from doves to turkeys to quail to chukar, and then during waterfowl season, we've got some of the best Pacific flyway that comes right through Southern California. And so I got into bird hunting at a young age, and it really that was my comfort zone. That's where I stayed for many, many, many years. And then 6 years ago, I found out that I had an intolerance to beef. My body cannot digest bovine fat and some other things. And so I had to give up all red meat because of the fact that at a grocery store, all you can pick up is cows and cattle and all that kind of stuff. So I was actually at the archery range getting ready for turkey season in the fall, and I was talking to this old timer, and he was saying that he was going to Wyoming for antelope opener, and I was like, man, I wish I could afford to hunt out of state, because again, hunting out of state is very expensive. I mean, like, I'm looking at that Alaska moose hunt. It's like $800 for an out of state tag. Like, that's not just something you go and do. That's something you plan. And he goes, no, doe tags are $38 for a doe tagging license. And I was like, well, I can afford that. So I didn't even pull up my bow. I went straight home, got online, bought some leftover tags, and me and a buddy jumped in his Honda Civic, and we drove 18 hours to Wyoming, and we hunted hard for a week in snow and hail and rain, and we both got an antelope, and we strapped him on top of his Honda Civic, and we got him home, and I hated the meat. It wasn't what my So after all that time and effort, I was like, dude, this sucks. But it was because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to prepare it properly. I didn't know how to butcher it myself. I didn't know anything surrounding wild game. I was always, if you ask me about birds, I can tell you how to fillet out, how to pluck any bird you want. But when it came to a four-legged critter, really was kind of in the dark about it. And I was raised on that idea that if you kill it, you eat it. So my goal was, how can I make this antelope taste good? How can I make it edible for my family? And so for a whole year, I devoted myself to understanding flavors and concepts and butchering and how things taste and what pairs well with sage, because sometimes antelope can taste like you're sucking on a sage branch, just like mule deer here in Southern California, as well as mule deer in the other states that have them. It's a very strong, potent flavor. If those whitetail guys come and eat it, they're like, this is disgusting. But that's what we were raised on, you know? And so learned how to fix that, and started from field to plate, a couple years later, just out of this idea that I started getting a lot of likes on posting wild game pictures and recipes. And I look back at the recipes I started 3 years ago, and I was like, why the heck did anybody ever follow me? They're just, taken on my kitchen table, looking like crap with orange lighting. And I kind of found my passion in that aspect of it, of creating beautiful dishes that are simple, easy at home that my family enjoys. And as of now, I'm completely 100% wild game in my house. Either it's caught, shot, but never bought. And it's kind of cool to be living 10 minutes from Disneyland and say that the only meat you eat is by your own hands or your friend's hands. So it's kind of where it's taken off.
So now, living down there in Anaheim, do you get a lot of, or Garden Grove? Anaheim.
They're the
Garden
same.
Grove.
Yeah.
As far as anybody listening to this podcast is concerned, it's the same thing.
It's in the Sublime song. Just go listen to Sublime, and you'll hear Garden Grove.
Exactly. So do you get a lot of, what kind of reactions do you get from neighbors, things like that?
It started off really negative, especially when I bring home a wild boar and it's hanging off the back of my truck and I'm skinning it behind my townhome. It wasn't received very well from a lot of the neighbors, because again, it's something that's not ever talked about. It's something that's never looked about. It's not on TV shows. You go to Walmart and the hunting aisle is 4 pairs of shirts and, a camouflage backpack. And that's it. So it was taken very negatively, especially at church too. A lot of people, they didn't understand why I was doing it, but it's turned into, I'm throwing wild game parties for people. And there's older people at my church who can't afford to go out or don't have the desire to, but they're purchasing, I'm buying tags for them to go out and hunt for them and give them and donate all the meat to them, because they realize this is cleaner, better meat. And so it's kind of a cool transition this past 2 years, as it went from people so disgusted by it to people that are so passionate and realize that I'm not just doing it to become famous. I'm doing it because I want to eat better with my family. I want to teach people the correct way to do it rather than just go to the grocery store and buy a steak.
Well, I really feel like a lot of people, that's the difference right there. A lot of people, when they know what you're actually doing, when they know your reasons behind it, how it's done, and what the actual result is, when it's more than just that knee-jerk emotional reaction, they they react a lot better to it. It's a lot more of a reasonable, thought out reaction than just that initial, oh my gosh, there's a bloody pig in your backyard.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had the cops called on me because I've walked into the grocery store in camouflage and blood on me after turkey hunting to go get a bag of ice. I've had Department of Fish and Game at my door more times than I can count because someone on social media sees it and freaks out. I know all our DFG guys by name now because they'll just call me, hey, did you do this? I'm like, nope. They're like, all right, cool. Because of the fact that it is such a different world that I'm really excited about, because one of my goals this next year is to create a Southern California hunting community type deal. I want to have a big get together with everyone, because the more people I find through social media, they're like, dude, I live in Van Nuys, or I live in San Diego, or I live in Riverside or Corona or wherever it is in Southern California, and they hunt, but they didn't know anyone else hunts around them. Same as you and same as I, who live down here, and we think we're by ourselves. But our community is so big that I want to start to bring that community together and start to do more as a Southern California community to help build that conservation aspect up.
Well, it's one of those funny things where I feel like there's a lot of hunters down here that definitely long for that community and want to get tied in with the other hunters. But then I feel like there's a lot of people down here too, I've talked about it, who almost take pride and want to kind of believe like, I'm the only person in Southern California that hunts, and it's almost a matter of like ego and pride for them, and they want to ignore the fact that there's anyone else that's part of that community. It's like a weird...
It is. And I always tell them too, I said, you're really good at taking pictures of sunrises and sunsets. And in Southern California, that's what we do as hunters. It's a very game-rich environment with a lot of private land attached to that. Mm-hmm. And the more people the more spots you have, the more opportunities you have. It's not this is my mountain, because it's not your mountain. And if you could talk to guys, I find guys that go, hey, I've hunted this side of the mountain forever, and there's no wild game on it. And then I come off the mountain with 2 turkeys. And they're like, but there's turkeys up there? And I'm like, yeah, I told you to come with me, And it's this, once you get past this idea that, like I was saying earlier, that I'm better than you or I'm the only one, then you can really start to dive into this aspect of wild game and especially in Southern California.
So now, talking about wild game and, the whole concept of from field to plate, that really kind of encompasses everything from the second that animal goes down to the second it's inside of you.
Correct. Yeah.
So what, I guess kind of starting from the beginning, like, how much does what you do in the field affect what comes out, what ends up on your plate, as far as like taste and all of that? So, you're prepping your animal in the field. How much can that affect what you end up getting in the freezer?
Oh, drastically. And I did a conference on this past Saturday. We had here in Southern California, we had 25 youth and 25 adults that came to a class to learn how to skin, gut, clean a rabbit, how to cook recipes. It was here in Southern California. And a lot of the main question from a lot of the adults was, how long do I have to gut my animal before it goes bad? And my response is, in Southern California, immediately. Like, you need to get that gut sack out of there, because we're right now, hunting season's open for a lot of us. It opened in July for archery season in some zones, and it's 106 degrees outside.
Mm-hmm.
So the faster you get that out, it will impact the taste. And also, if you're traveling too, it's getting that animal on ice, getting that animal cooled down as fast as possible. You'll hear guys that talk about adrenaline and say that adrenaline causes it. Adrenaline, I've never really experienced that aspect of it. I think a lot of the negative, wild taste comes from blood that's still within the meat, and how long you gut it and how fast it gets cooled. But once you start to understand that, it's pretty simple to get.
So I get a lot of people that come to me when I tell them, like, oh, I'm off, I'm going to hunt elk, or I want to hunt some deer. their first thing they tell me is, "Oh, I just can't stand it. It's too tough and gamey." It's.
I hate that word.
What's your response to when people come at you like that?
First of all, I tell them, how can a dove, a pheasant, a quail, and an elk all taste gamey? Gamey is I get this debate a lot. Gamey is a negative word in our industry, especially in my aspect of cooking. No one rarely ever says it's gamey and they like it. Gamey is like this negative idea of what wild game is. So I tell people, oh, I eat mule deer. Oh, it's so gamey. And I go, well, what does gamey mean to you? Oh, it tastes like, and they start to open up this idea. I said, then tell me it tastes like dirt, then I'll be able to work with it. But to say gamey, it's not a flavor. It's not even, it shouldn't even be a real word. I mean, spell check spells it 3 different ways. So that tells you that nobody understands this concept. But yeah, I usually come at it and ask them what their favorite dish is. And then a lot of my dishes come from people that say they hate wild game, but their favorite dish is blank. And so my goal is to create that dish and have them over for dinner and have them enjoy that dish with said wild game that they don't like. And that's kind of where this passion has erupted from, with someone saying, I don't like pheasant because it's gamey. Okay, one of my top recipes was an orange chicken style pheasant. And it came from some guy saying they don't eat pheasant. So I made this recipe, and his family, guess what? They eat pheasant. So I take it as a challenge. I don't ever take it as like an attack on me. And if someone says wild game's too tough, it's because it's overcooked. That's plain and simple. They overcooked it, or they didn't know how to properly cut against the grain when they're eating it. But you can get a steak at a restaurant that's overcooked, tough, and doesn't taste like steak. So it's all in preparation.
Yeah, I get a lot of, honestly, that's probably, I'd say, I mean, you know how it goes. That's the first question anybody that's not familiar with it asks you when they find out you're a hunter is, well, what do you do with the meat?
Right.
And, what is it in the words of John Mayer? Well, it's meat, sir. You eat it. But
that's true.
But yeah, and so, I get a lot of people, and I'll talk about it. I'll be like, well, I'm also picking up a bear tag when I go out. And they're like, you can eat bear? I'm like, yeah. I mean, it tastes different depending on what time of year you're chasing it, but
100%.
So is
yeah,
that...
no, man, I eat, and again, I'm the guy. I mean, I had USA Today actually reached out to me earlier this year because they asked a bunch of people in the industry. They wanted to interview somebody that uses every edible part of the animal, and everyone's like, oh, you got to call from field to plate. You got to talk to Jeremiah, because if it's in the animal, it's edible. And if it's a 4-legged critter, it's edible. It might not be the tastiest of animals, but I've eaten coyote, I've eaten bobcat, I've eaten bear during the nastiest times in November, and the deal is it's all about preparation. Like I brined my coyote for 48 hours almost, and changed the water every 10 to 12 hours until it didn't smell like a dead wet dog. And I know that doesn't sound appetizing, but I made chili with it, and no one could tell the difference. And so once you get past this idea that, that's gross, your world opens up. And I was challenged this hunting season, to eat everything from the esophagus to the butthole. and everything in between. So I've actually been doing a lot of research on Native American cooking, and I found some recipes on lungs. So this year I'm going to eat deer lung. I'm making a tripe out of the stomach. I'm going to be using the small and large intestine in different recipes by making sausages with it. So there's literally an endless supply of nutrients within that. Also, I didn't realize, but the adrenal gland on top of the kidney has more vitamin C than 6 oranges. So Native Americans used to actually eat that adrenal gland during the winter to not get scurvy. And they would pass that along to explorers that were coming through that were dying of scurvy. They would say, hey, eat this elk adrenal gland. And they would eat it, and they would have enough vitamin C to get them through the winter, which is, to me, ridiculous to think about, that there's vitamin C inside of an animal.
That's crazy. I'm gonna have to sit down with you sometime. Well, I don't know, either off the air or on the air before I go out, and maybe get some tips on if I get something, some interesting additions that I should add to my set of quarters.
Yeah.
Well, actually, yeah. What would if you've got your typical quartering of an animal? So we'll say an elk. Because I'm going out and chasing elk.
Front shoulders, back straps, inner tenderloins, rib meat, and rear quarters.
So that's kind of the standard that you grab when you're packing out the meat. What would you say are? Give me maybe like 3 things that you think are underrated or people never take that you would recommend that I study up and pull out of the elk to take back with me to either eat at camp or take home.
I mean, I can go the standard heart, liver, kidneys because most people leave that in there. And even if you don't want to eat a heart, liver, or kidney, if you add those to your ground meat, it adds a lot of iron and a lot of richness to your ground meat, and you'll never even realize it. But heart to me is one of the most underrated pieces. A lot of the Midwestern guys, I tell them, hey, try this heart recipe, and they're disgusted by it until they eat it, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I've thrown 80 deer hearts away. To me, it's the filet mignon of the animal. It's better than backstrap, better than inner tenderloin. And then the tongue. The tongue is phenomenal to make. I make shredded tacos out of it. So it's really easy. You throw it in you parboil it for a little while. You peel off the skin. You put it back in a pressure cooker or slow cooker and let it all break down and season it. And you eat it on tacos. And I mean, I've taken it to church, and junior high and high school kids eat it and have no idea until I tell them. Also, if your animal has caul fat surrounds the stomach and the intestine area.
That's kind of the webbing almost around it, right?
Yeah, it looks like a spider web, but it's pure fat. So you can use that as bacon in a sense. So what we'll do when we're out in the bush is we'll take that venison heart, wrap it in caul fat, and then fry it over the fire. And it helps it from drying out. It adds flavor to it. And I call it nature's bacon because that's literally what it is. So yeah, so tongue, heart. If you get a male, testicles. I know it sounds funky, but I'll say it again. I love testicles. Just don't tell my wife. But no, they cook up well. I mean, even when I went and shot that Access in Texas, and I sit there and lop them off, and all these Texas boys are like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm getting every usable piece of meat." They're like, "All right, cool."
I'm making a necklace. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I actually saved the sack and make a coin purse for the daughters, but that's a different story. So it's this idea that if it's edible, eat it. Get over the gross factor, because in America we're the ones that throw away the most. But I've been to 13 different countries, and you'll be amazed what people eat and enjoy it, and what they eat first. And when we were in India, and we kill a goat for one of these tribes. First thing all the kids do is go over and they just start grabbing like the liver and just eating parts of the liver off raw, like warm and raw. It's like in America that would never happen. That goes in the gut pile. So,
well, it's one of those funny things. I remember I was watching an episode of Meat Eater, and I remember I'm blanking on which episode it was, but Steve was talking about along the lines of he felt weird eating. It was when he had to eat a monkey.
I've eaten monkey in Thailand.
Yeah, I think he was like with a tribe in like Ecuador or something like that, and they were out, and he had this moment of realization, like, I feel weird about this, but it's like it's a sign of kind of my, I hate to say it, but like I hate the phrase, but like first world privilege that
right.
I can have that feeling, like, and feel weird about that, because to them it's just food. They use as much of it as they can, and so it was an interesting realization, and albeit I'm not sure how open-minded I am to all of that. It takes a little bit for me to get over myself, but it was an interesting thought. Like you said, it's something you wouldn't see in a lot of other countries, is a lot of what we leave behind going in the gut pile. So
right, no, and that's why that challenge was presented to me, and I said, all right, fine, I'll try to eat as much as I can, from tip to tail. As hunters always say, I'm a tip to tail hunter, but they leave 90% of it in the field. So it's like, I mean, I even use bones. I mean, I use all the bones for stocks and soups and bone marrow and all that good stuff. It's great. I mean, I'll use the the bone marrow sometimes and make like bone marrow sauces and stuff to go in it, or you put the bone marrow right into a ground and make a bone marrow burger. I mean, here in LA, you can get a beef bone marrow burger and it's like $26. I'm like, dude, and these guys just throw away these bones that they can get all this marrow out of and have a $26 burger at their house, you know?
Albeit here in LA, to some extent, a $26 burger isn't all that out of the ordinary for people.
No, it's cheap. It's actually pretty cheap. It probably doesn't even come with fries.
Yeah. Also depends on if you're ordering near Disneyland or downtown LA too.
Yeah. Are you in the packing district? Oh man.
Yeah. But so what if you had to pick maybe a favorite game animal that's one of your favorite things to either prepare or cook, what would you, gun to your head, what would you pick?
And I get this question all the time, and I think I change it. I think it changes every single time depending on what my flavor my preference is. But if I said I always tell everybody, if I had to hunt one animal and eat one animal for the rest of my life, it would have to be waterfowl.
Okay.
The hunt itself is my favorite hunting. Sitting in the blind, cracking jokes with your buddies, trying to perfect your calls, and then watching those ducks drop into your blind and shooting them, and the dogs working, or your buddy who missed going out there getting everyone's ducks, because that's the rule. If he misses, whoever misses goes out and picks up ducks. But and then getting home and preparing this dish that just there's so many opportunities to create with that little duck. So I would have to say like waterfowl itself. I know a lot of guys are like, what, waterfowl is not that good, but prepared correctly, it's one of my absolute favorite. From egg rolls to a roasted duck, it's just incredible.
So now what would you say, I don't know if you even have one, what would you say would be your least favorite? When, like, if somebody brought it to you and like, hey, I want to make a dish, you're kind of like, great.
Besides coyote, I'd have to say probably like mule deer. Out of all the flavors that go into it, mule deer is one of the funkiest tasting, I could say, because if it's a high mountain Montana or Utah mule deer, tastes a lot different than those low-lying desert mule deer, which are eating all the roots and cactus and stuff. Getting a mule deer in Southern California, Arizona, some parts of New Mexico, they've got a really strong sage flavor to them. So it's really hard to pair that or get people excited about eating it when all they smell is that. Since smell is part of your taste, you have to get over that smell. So I would say mule deer would be the one that I'm usually like, hey, if I want to create something for you, I'm not pulling the mule deer out. I'm pulling the whitetail or the elk or something out to get people excited about eating wild game. Yeah,
sounds like you don't have quite as many options with what you can do with that flavor profile because it is so strong.
Yeah, there's ways to get around it, but like I made a sweet Italian mule deer chili. So mule deer, or the sage, pairs really well with garlic and soy and ginger and the Italian and Oriental aspects of it. So if you stick to those dishes, it pairs great because it adds that flavor. But if you try to do like a grilled steak, you're just going to be like, eh. Or if you try to make like a meatloaf, a lot of times guys are like, it's overpowering because they're not pairing those proper flavors with that sage flavor.
Gotcha. And that's something I also, especially when people ask me about bear, that I kind of have to explain to them, and that a lot of people I don't think realize is, where you, as far as, what the landscape is you shoot, the bear's been living in that you shoot, what time of year it is, and all of this stuff affects, for certain animals, a lot of the flavor you get out of the meat. A bear that's been eating berries all spring is going to taste a lot different than a bear that's been rummaging through trash and gut piles in the summer.
Oh, and that goes with every single animal. I've harvested animals all across this country and Canada, and I'll tell you one thing: hunters always get disgusted at me, but I always cut open the gut, the stomach, and I go through the stomach. It stinks, it's gross, but I want to see what the animal's eating. Not only does it make me a better hunter when I'm looking for habitat to find future animals, but it also tells me what to pair that flavor with when I'm cooking it. Because I've opened up, bears, and it's been full of just dead rotten fish. Well, guess what the meat tastes like? Dead rotten fish. And so, understanding that when you get into that gut pile versus taking it home and trying a dish, you don't understand how it is. But I mean, I've eaten the best the turkeys I've ever eaten are off of like an old apple plantation. And all they were eating was fermented and rotten apples. So they had this really sweet apple taste to them. Some of the grossest turkeys I've ever tasted were eating, in this, I don't even know what it was growing out in this field. They were eating the buds off this plant, and it tasted like super, super sour meat. So yeah, I mean, what goes into your body is what you get out of your body, as we heard growing up with like, hey, don't eat McDonald's because what you put in is what you get out. Same thing goes with animals. If they're putting in gross, they're going to taste gross. If they're putting in good, that's why a lot of these whitetail hunters are so big on their crops that they're planting, because they want that game to taste a certain way, like clover or that grass-fed beef aspect of it. So,
on that note, let's take a quick moment to hear a word from one of my partners. All right, y'all, I'm not afraid to admit that I'm a huge geek when it comes to games, and well, let's face it, a lot of other things too. However, when it comes to nerdy card and board games, I really can't get enough. So when I found out there was a card game out there combining two of my passions, hunting and nerdy adventure games, I really had to pick it up. The game is called Gut Pile, and the goal is to build the ultimate Alaskan hunt. You do so by collecting several cards including animals such as grizzly bear and moose, hunting locations like Yonder Mountain and Nunya Creek, as well as weaponry, gear, and transportation. But make sure you've got tags or donuts handy, because you never know when an Alaskan state trooper will drop in unannounced. It's a great game and a ton of fun for hunters who are inspired to share stories about their past hunts, as well as non-hunters who can be brought into discussions about hunting in a very non-threatening way. If you'd like to learn more, check out my podcast with the guys at Gut Pile Games by visiting livingcountryinthecity.com/22 and get $5 off your order from Gut Pile Games by visiting our partners page at livingcountryinthecity.com/partners. So, we talked a little bit about, you enjoying preparing meals for friends and for other people that You've talked a little bit about, kind of you doing these classes for the youth class as far as skinning. What else does Field to Plate, From Field to Plate, kind of encompass? What other kind of things do you do with From Field to Plate?
I think the best part about calling myself From Field to Plate is it's endless. I can do anything. I mean, I do a lot of stuff with youth. I take out a lot of new hunters. My goal this year that I set, if anyone was on social media, they saw, was to take out 20 new hunters this year, or 20 people that didn't understand hunting, that did hunt but wanted a better understanding. And part of that goal was, my passion was to create a class called From Field to Plate 101, and it's finally a reality. Everyone listening to this, it's probably all the tickets are probably taken because it goes on sale tomorrow, which is August 9th. So by the time you listen to this, sorry, hopefully I'll have another class.
We're just taunting you with it.
Yeah. But no, I if it goes well, I will be having more classes, because that's my passion, is to train and develop within this industry. So often people get so caught up in the me, in the I, and I want From Field to Plate. That's why it's not Jeremiah from Field to Plate. It's From Field to Plate, because it incorporates everybody that I talk to. It incorporates all my family, all my friends. We're all From Field to Plate. I had a buddy text me this morning, and he has my From Field to Plate sticker on the back of his truck. He goes, every time I walk out to my car, I get excited that I go From Field to Plate, that I'm a part of a movement to eat better, to be better, and to be conservationists. And I think that's the whole goal for what I do, is to really teach people that it's your two hands. It's you getting dirty for your dinner. If you live in the city, it's doable. If you live in the country, it's doable. If you live like I do and you do in Southern California, where the only grass we have is at the parks, it's still doable. We might have to travel 2 to 3 hours to go do it, but it's doable. And if your passion's there, I want to be able to be the one that's going to reach out and help you and ask any question. I mean, I tell everyone all the time, my email is always open. My Instagram direct message is always open. My Facebook message is always open. And I get 20 to 30 a day. Hey, how do I do this? Or I want to cook this, or I saw you cook this, or this tastes gross. My daughter won't eat this. And then I get the other ones that, hey, I've tried this and my family loves it. Thank you so much for what you do. And I want to keep it simple, stupid. I want recipes that my 7 and 3-year-old daughter want to eat. I mean, I love some of these wild game chefs who create dishes that are beautifully plated and look amazing, and then you look at the recipe and it's 47 ingredients and it's going to cost you $80 to make. Where I'm like, I don't want to go spend $80 for dinner when my total grocery bill for the week is $80. So I want, especially out in the city, out in the country, talking to some of these farmers, they're like, yeah, I've got these books, but I can't afford it. But what are they eating, and how can I make it accessible for them to try it? So,
no, I think that's super important what you're doing, and because to some extent, I think that is the future of hunting right now. That's how, even more so than, people passing it from, to their children, things like that. What's going to grow the future of hunting is people like you who are reaching out to other folks who wouldn't be exposed to it otherwise. But because, there's this huge push now for getting rid of GMOs, organic food, grass-fed beef, free-range animals, all of this stuff, there's that appeal that may not have reached out to someone of a different generation in a different spot, but that's so important now that I think really that's what's going to be growing hunting for future generations more than anything else right now.
Yeah, so last week I decided that this class was going to go on last Sunday, and I put out the announcement on social media, and I was telling my wife that night, I'm like, man, I'm not even going to get like 5 emails, just this idea. I had over 400 responses in 7 days, and 30 of those I've actually saved because they were from vegans and vegetarians who wanted to go out and do it. And it blew my mind that there was vegans and vegetarians, first of all, that were following me and not yelling at me. I'm usually getting yelled at by them. But then they want to change it because of the fact that they understand what I'm doing and how I'm doing it with respect towards the animal, and they want to be a part of that. They want to be able to eat meat again without the industries forced upon the meat. I did a video for Silencer Co. You can go on my Facebook page and watch it. It's a little 4-minute video that I did about what I do and who I am. And in there I talk about I was doing research for a magazine, and it's proven that the average steak in a grocery store touches 50 to 100 hands and machines.
Ugh.
50 things to 100 things touch your meal before it gets to your house. I mean, that's from cars to planes to tractors to farmers to workers in a factory to the grocery store people that are packaging it, the plastic machines, all these things you think about, and we're putting that into our body, even though it's grass-fed or it's organic or it's whatever you say. But as hunters, we're really living that organic lifestyle. We're really getting back to our roots. And that's why I try to teach people to do it themselves. I mean, the class I'm doing, it's literally you shoot the animal to you package the animal and take it home. Everything in between, I'm going to teach you how to do, from skinning, gutting, taking those undesirables within the inside that we were talking about earlier, all the way to a full-on butcher class. You take it to a butcher. If you have a good butcher and you know that you're getting good meat, you're cool with it. But I hear so many horror stories from people that take their meat to a butcher and don't even know if they're getting their meat back. And it goes into that whole thing. Yeah, I don't know how long you left the guts in yours. I don't know how long you left it hang in. I don't know anything that goes about it. And you're getting back this meat that you think is yours, and it's really not. Not all of them are that way, so please, butchers, don't start calling and yelling at me.
Butchers Union is angry now.
Yeah, there's many of you that I know and I respect, and I would, if I'm in an area and I don't have time, I would totally use you. But it's also a cost factor. I mean, it costs $120 to get a deer processed. You can buy a good vacuum sealer and a meat grinder for $120 and do it for the rest of your life, and it never is going to cost you a dime. So that's what I want to teach. I want to teach people that, if you say you're going to do it, then do it. Get your hands dirty, get out there, and enjoy your meal. I mean, pluck your birds and skin your animals and get the kids involved. And I came home from turkey season this past spring, and I shot a turkey up in Davis, which is up near Sacramento, Northern California, 8 hours away. And I came home, my little 3-year-old rips open the ice chest and then just sits on the ground and starts to sob. I was like, June, what's wrong? She's like, you plucked it without me. And in her eyes, we get our hands dirty for dinner. The reason I have skull mounts and turkey feathers and stuff around my house is to remind us what we're eating and the stories that go behind it. And I had a parent call me from my daughter's school because she brought meat to school and it was deer. And she goes, "Your daughter said she was eating deer, and I don't like her lying to my kids." And I was like, "I don't like your kid tattling on mine for being a liar when she's not." And it's this idea that my kids are aware of what they're eating. They can tell you the animal it came from, how far my daddy's shot was, or what color it was. I mean, my 3-year-old for Christmas or for her birthday is asking for a pink duck call so she can go out duck hunting this year.
Oh, yes.
Like, so I'm literally going to get the coolest pink duck call I can find.
That's got to be a moment of pride right there, too. It's like, yes.
Well, pride for me and disgust for my wife. She's like, "No, not another one." But this year for dove season, my 3-year-old and my 7-year-old are both going out opening day. So it should be a lot of fun to have them out there running and, shagging birds for me when they fall. So
that's so great. You got to have so much, that's got to be such a huge sense of pride knowing that your daughters want to follow in that and they're excited about it. And as you said, little bird fetchers built in.
Amen, man. That's what I used to do.
So as we're kind of winding down here, I always like to end with, just some advice or any tips for, brand new hunters, guys just starting to get into this, or, folks like myself who have been interested for a while but may have not started because, I live in the city. I'm not anywhere near hunting places I can go hunting. There's just so much to learn, or maybe feel overwhelmed or super intimidated. Especially you living in, being a Southern California resident, living in the middle of the city. You're not way out in the Inland Empire where it's not that far to the mountains or whatever. You're
right.
What would you tell that person? What advice could you give them?
I always tell all new hunters or existing hunters who are trying to get better is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to do something wrong. We get told so much in this society that you have to be perfect, you have to wear a certain amount of a certain clothing brand, or you have to drink a certain protein shake, or you have to be a CrossFit athlete to go out and do this. Be the best you that you can be, and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to screw up. Don't be afraid to bring the wrong gun to the field and get made fun of. I know that one of my friends who listens to your podcast, hi Steven, I know you're going to hear this because you were talking to me about it today. He was like, "Oh, I was listening to a podcast and I heard you talking about gut pile." I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be on that soon." He's like, "What?" So that's good for you. But Steven, the first time, he reached out to me on social media and said, "Hey, I'm a Southern California hunter, want to get into it." And he came out to the dove field and he had a gun with a little short barrel, like a little 18-inch barrel, and was trying to shoot dove that are flying super fast and around him. And instead of him getting upset when I went over and gave him another gun to use because he would be better at it, he took it with stride and he grabbed that gun and he went and shot birds, and he was not afraid to learn from someone that had gone before him. Because guess what? I screwed up. I still screw up a lot. And I still learn every time I go out. Every time I hunt with somebody new, I'm learning. I take one positive and one negative, and I build on that positive, and I try to fix the negative in my life. So that's the biggest thing is don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to reach out to us. I know that it gets intimidating seeing a very large social media following. Like, oh, I can't reach out to this person because they're too popular or they're too whatever. That's BS. If they don't reach out to you, then you shouldn't be following them anyway. Because we're all in this to better our industry, and I run my social media. There's no person behind the desk that does it. So if you reach out, you're getting me, and I'll talk to you through anything. I'll work through anything. There's a lot of non-hunters that follow me and ask me cooking questions, just regular cooking questions, or butchering questions. Hey, I got a chicken. How do I prepare it? So it doesn't have to be hunting related, but yeah, my door's always open. But the biggest thing I say is just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go out there with jeans and a t-shirt and go hunt, because the deer don't care. You don't have to be in 100% camouflage with face paint on to kill a deer. I always hear stories of like the old timers who who laugh at us because they still go out in jeans and flannel. And I walked out with one guy in the turkey field. He had on jeans, flannel, and a cowboy hat, and I was in complete head to toe, mossy oak. And he goes, well, I know you're pretty fancy, but I could still kill a bird too. And it always stuck with me that you don't have to be the industry idea to go out and get your own food. So
I definitely catch myself a lot of the time slipping into that. I think I mentioned it earlier before kind of we started. I'm cataloging all my gear right now. I'm going through, I'm weighing stuff, and I'm figuring out what I need to take. And I catch myself when I have something that's not exactly what I want it to be, or that weighs how much I want it to, or whatever it is. Like, oh man, this is just gonna screw me up so bad. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's really not. People, I consider myself lucky. I had some extra funds saved away, so I was able to pick up some high-end gear. But there's a lot more successful hunters out there than that have been doing it for years with a lot less than I have, and it's an important thing. Like you said, we set the bar so high for ourselves, and that transfers over to other people too. It's important to get out there and do it. Don't let all of this stuff just prevent you from getting out. So,
100%. Yeah, and it's hard too, this industry too, watching someone get a brand new bow every season. I have a buddy down here, and he's like, man, I gotta go get a new bow because so and so got a new bow, and I'm like, dude, your bow is only 8 months old. Like, who cares if the cam shaved off a millimeter of a percent of this? A stick and a string will kill an animal. It's how you use your equipment. And I'm still using the same shotgun that I got when I was 18. I've been offered Benelli's and I've been offered all this other stuff, and I go out with my Beretta that I bought when I was 18, and that's my gun. It's not the fanciest, not the prettiest, but guess what? It's killed a heck of a lot of animals, and it's filled the freezer. I go out with old fly rods. I go out with old, Shimano reels that were my grandpa's and stuff. And you just go out and do it. And guess what? I catch as many fish as those guys that have the high dollar reels. I shoot as many duck and as many quail and as many pheasant as those guys that are walking around with the $12,000 guns. Is it nice to shoot those? Oh yeah, it's nice. Is there a difference? Yeah, you can feel a difference, but you don't need it. You can use a hand-me-down to get started. And then again, like you said, once you got those extra funds and you want to spoil it, go for it. But just know that next year there's going to be something new that's coming out that's lighter and faster. So just be comfortable in what you have and enjoy it, man. That's just what hunting's all about, is getting out, enjoying the fellowship with your friends and fellowship with nature. And if you get to bring home meat, great. If not, well, it's better than sitting at home. So
absolutely. So if people wanted to find From Field to Plate online, follow what you're doing, where's the best place to search you out?
The blessed place is go to church on Sunday with me. I'll save you a spot in the pew. No, the best place, Instagram's pretty central. From Field to Plate. That's really easy. Facebook's From Field to Plate. FromFieldToPlate.com. You go to Twitter, it's From Field, the number 2 plate, because you can't have that many characters. But yeah, if you pretty much type in From Field to Plate in Google search, I'm going to pop up. I'm going to be right there, full of recipes. I've got recipes all over my site with animals. I'm redoing my site to make it more user-friendly, but it's jam-packed full of it. I've got some fun stuff coming up this new year with working on cookbooks and a bunch of other stuff that are kind of idiot-friendly. And so, yeah.
That's fantastic, and I'll make sure to post up all those links on my show notes page. That'll be livingcountryinthecity.com/30. You can find all the links to your stuff up there. Well, any final parting thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, when are you and I going to go hike to the observatory? Because it looks like that's your favorite thing to do. So,
hey, it's the only place 5 minutes away that I can do before work, and it manages to kick my butt every time. But I don't know,
dude. This Saturday we're supposed to have the meteor shower.
Yeah,
the observatory is going to be killer up there with less light pollution. So
that's not a bad spot. I'd probably rather try and get up to like Mount Hollywood or something like that, because the observatory is going to be packed to the gills.
Yeah, but you can go nerd watch. That's the best part, watching all the nerds out there with their telescopes. They're pretty exciting to listen to. But no, I think yeah, I think parting words, just have fun, man. And it's exciting. And I'm excited that there's other people in SoCal that have a passion for this and a desire to change our industry and to change Southern California's idea of what a hunter truly is. We're not all rednecks. We're normal people who just like to get out and do it ourselves.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for hopping on the show, man. And we will hopefully talk again soon. Maybe do a how-to episode once I get some wild game in the freezer.
Oh yeah, and I've got a big hunting season, so I should have tons in the freezer too. So
awesome. All right, y'all, that'll do it for episode 30 of Living Country in the City. Make sure you head on over to our show notes page at livingcountryinthecity.com/30 to get those links so you can check out From Field to Plate and give Jeremiah some love. Don't forget about the Hike to Hunt Challenge. Support backcountry hunters and anglers by visiting hiketohuntchallenge.com and making your donation. But in the meantime, keep it country, y'all.
Thank y'all for listening to Living Country in the City. Get show notes and check out the blog, product reviews, events, and more at livingcountryinthecity.com.